Okay. Got a couple things I want to get off my chest here. Saw an article over the weekend where allegedly federal officers sprayed medical supplies that the peaceful protesters had in a tent off to the side to be used during their peaceful protests. That's what I'm going to talk about. Before I get there, I want to talk about Jerry Nadler. And real quick, before I get into Nadler, let me just say, please subscribe on YouTube, Freedom's Tether. Hit the little bell for to get notifications. Review and comment. 5 stars. It's the appropriate number of stars. Definitely appreciate that. Find me on social media at Freedom's Tether. Make sure you follow me there. Like and share my videos and everything. Make sure you click subscribe now before I say something in this video that might piss you off, and then you decide you don't want to, change your mind, whatever, or forget about it. So go ahead and do that now while you're watching. Thanks. And Jerry Nadler. Jerry Nadler was asked about Antifa and their actions in Portland. Jerry Nadler said that was a myth being talked about in Washington, D.C. Now, this has been taken to say that Jerry Nadler is saying that Antifa is a myth. And while I would like to, jump on that bandwagon to rag on Nadler, what I honestly think he was saying was the actions that they're taking in Portland, their peaceful protests, the belief, the narrative pushed by the mainstream media that they are peaceful protests, that they're not as peaceful as what's being said. I think that's what he is saying is the myth, was that they're not being as violent as we on the right are saying they are. That the mainstream media, what the mainstream media is saying is true, and that anything else is a myth. I don't think he's saying that Antifa itself is a myth. Now, he could be, and if he really is saying that, I'd like to see something to verify, to say that that's what that is, and then I'll rag on him all day long. But until I see that, I think what he's saying is that their actions are not in the form of violent riots. That part is a myth, which we all know is not true. Either way, it's not true. That being said, going back to Antifa in Portland, to have medical supplies at a peaceful protest it insinuates several things. Now, unless it's a hot day when you're protesting, and you're going to have water on site, some ice packs, something like that to help treat heat exhaustion, and to stay hydrated, or if it's cold out, heaters, help to keep something to help keep warm. You don't have medical supplies on site typically for protests. Protesters don't need medical supplies, not the kind that were damaged in the alleged violation. And I say violation for a reason I'll explain in a minute. So, protesters don't need medical supplies. These medical supplies were rubber gloves to treat lacerations and blood and open wounds. There were gauze, bandages, things of nature like that. Eye wash, stuff that would be used in riot situations to treat people. If you have that on site, that insinuates that you're not there to protest, you're there to be violent, that you're expecting to get hurt or someone to get hurt. protesters don't need these kinds of medical supplies. The second thing it insinuates, or the second thing to think about in this thing, that people who riot, this is why they're being called protesters by the mainstream media, is because people who riot are already in violation of the law. They're being belligerently violent, damaging people and property, or hurting people, damaging property. That's a violation of the law. That's why the mainstream media is pushing the narrative that these are peaceful protesters, when in fact they are not. Third thing that has come, that's mentioned in the article, or that I put on there for the insinuations, but it's mentioned in the article that federal officers, by allegedly spraying the medical supplies with pepper spray, have violated the Geneva Convention and have committed war crimes. That is what is being propagated, but that's what's being pushed, is that federal officers committed war crimes by spraying pepper spray onto these medical supplies. Now, it's going to say that the Geneva Convention is for armed combat. Whether it's two countries against each other, internationally, or within a country's borders, between two factions inside that country, the Geneva Convention, says that, for medical supplies and medical things, that stuff should not be touched by two separate armed combatants. That's kind of, neutral ground. But they're armed combatants involved for it to be a war crime. But these are peaceful protests, right? Right? That's what they are. That's what we're told. Now, stating that what the federal officers allegedly had done, by calling it a war crime, it insinuates, like I already said, it insinuates armed combat, which takes us back to number one. Protesters don't need the medical supplies. And the fifth thing, to insinuate armed combat, to say that these rioters, these peaceful protesters, need the medical supplies because they're just trying to protest, but to insinuate armed combat by calling in the Geneva Convention, it opens the door perfectly for President Trump to call in the military, to federalize the National Guard and send them in as well, under the auspices of the Insurrection Act. Because to rebel, to form an insurrection, to openly assault the federal government, including federal property, is considered an insurrection or a rebellion. It is punishable by a fine, by prison time, to be unable to hold elected office, but it allows the president to send in the military to quell these riots, to quell this civil unrest. It's not a violation of the First Amendment because it is not a peaceful protest. Peaceful protesters do not use IEDs to blow 8-inch holes in the walls of federal courthouses. They do not use Molotov cocktails against federal officers. They do not use laser pointers to permanently blind police officers and federal officers. These federal officers are not a secret police. They are marked as police. On one shoulder they have the branch that they work for, and they do have identification numbers on their person so as to identify whom they are. Not for the protesters, but for their own people. Because the protester would be able to dox them and attack their family. But this is not a secret police force. These federal officers are there because the president does have jurisdiction to protect federal property. The law requires him to do so. And that is what he is doing with these federal officers. And for Antifa to fight back the way they're doing is considered, as organized as they are, can be considered an insurrection. And the president can use the Insurrection Act to quell the civil unrest. There are several on the right who think he should have done so already, although politically I can see why he hasn't done so. I think he should, though. I think he should say to hell with it and send him in. In any case, I just wanted to point that out. Something I wanted to talk about for a couple days now. Any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the comment below. Definitely do thank you for watching. Again, like and subscribe. Hit the little bell for notifications. Love you guys. Thanks for any support you give. Appreciate it. See y'all next time. Love you. Bye. God bless.